It looks
I
big.
clicked standard view and it came up.
Okay. Oh, you guys are the best. Thank you, all of you. I so appreciate the support. Webinars are super nerve-wracking, and you guys have been so supportive and so kind as we've kind of navigated this crazy way of communication. So thank you all. We really appreciate it. So sticking to our appreciation, I am super appreciative and respectful of your time, and thank you all so much for being here. We're going to cruise through our first couple of slides as we begin. Thanks, Grandma, and get going and jump into our resilient Raptors. So greetings, everyone, and welcome. My name is Willa Soroka, and I am the New Hampshire Audubon Education Specialist. Need to move this chat box because it's very distracting. I'm thrilled that you chose to join us this evening for the second webinar in our Resilient Raptor series. Before we begin, I would like to first acknowledge that this presentation is streaming to you from our state headquarters in Concord, New Hampshire, which is located within the site of the ancient village of Pennacook in Endakina, which is the traditional ancestral homeland and waterways of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. I would like to acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and our ancestors, the Alnambak, who have stewarded Endakina throughout the generations for thousands of years. New Hampshire Audubon is honored to continue the stewardship of these lands, providing opportunities for all people to form connections to the natural world through our programs in wildlife sanctuaries around the state. I invite you to learn more about the Indigenous presence on the land you occupy by visiting the website native-land.ca. Here, you can explore and click on territories of Indigenous people and get connected to resources to learn more. And for a more in-depth understanding of the Granite State, check out all the educational resources at indigenousnh.com. So some brief Zoom information before we dive in. We do have about 90 people registered for this evening's talk. So you'll see that we are in full webinar mode. That means that all of you guys, your cameras are off and you are set to mute for the time being. Please feel free to use the chat for any thoughts, comments, reactions you might have, and reserve the Q&A button for any questions that you would like answered by one of tonight's presenters. For those of you who joined us 2 weeks ago for our first Resilient Raptors webinar, welcome back. And for those of you attending for the first time this evening, we are so happy to have you with us. Thank you for your interest in tonight's topic. From now through June, we will host monthly webinars highlighting the fierce and fabulous Peregrine Falcon as we follow in real time the life cycle of the pair currently nesting in downtown Manchester. Materials and additional resources to accompany these presentations can be found at the Manchester City Library, the Concord Public Library, and at our Massabee Civic Center located in Auburn, New Hampshire. Many thanks go out to Peregrine Networks for generously donating their cameras and streaming implements to bring the Nest Cam footage to our homes, offices, and classrooms. Additionally, we'd like to thank the folks at the Brady Sullivan Tower who offer their building to our Peregrine pair and ensure the safety and protection of the special space where our annual Falcon story begins. Lastly, I'd like to thank Sue Martin of the Manchester City Library and Becky Caiston of the Concord Public Library for their partnership in this series. We look forward to more opportunities in the future that help us bridge literacy and the arts with science and conservation as we connect our communities through a shared interest in nature. Before we jump into tonight's presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly describe how this webinar fits into the larger mission of New Hampshire Audubon. For those of you joining tonight who don't know already, New Hampshire Audubon is a state-based environmental nonprofit organization that is completely independent from National Audubon. We rely on members and donors like you to support our charitable mission, which has 4 programmatic pillars. Conserving about 10,000 acres of wildlife sanctuaries throughout the state for habitat and recreation. Researching trends and discovering solutions for species in peril. Connecting people to nature through environmental education via school programs, field trips, summer camps, and webinars like these. And advocating for sound environmental policy in the New Hampshire State Legislature to protect the natural environment for wildlife and for people. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our website, visit us at one of our centers or consider becoming a member. Now, tonight's presentation outline goes a little like this. Those of you guys who had read the Zoom invitation earlier today and had seen the outline for the program in our event calendar, you might know already that we're going to start tonight's program by interviewing the one and only Chris Martin, who we have here with us again this evening. It's this guy right here in the corner, our senior biologist and raptor specialist, who is looking forward to having questions posed to him about what it's like to be a professional wildlife scientist. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to start popping those questions into the Q&A while I assist in facilitating them. Chris will give us a brief introduction for those of you guys who have not yet met him and know what his role is here with New Hampshire Audubon. And the rest of you who are prepared and interested in knowing a little bit more about life as a wildlife biologist, now's your chance to toss in some questions into that Q&A. After we spend about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how many questions we get in from you fine folk, we'll continue on by discussing the amazing anatomy of the peregrine falcon, while we discuss what really sets them apart from the rest of our avian friends. After that, Chris is going to pop back on and talk to us about the difference between the male peregrine falcon and the female peregrine falcon. Those of you might already have some ideas in mind if you've been watching the Manchester webcam. There's been lots of action occurring there and some interesting traits and trends that we've been able to observe. If we have time, we're going to briefly discuss data, but I'm not entirely confident we're going to have time with that because we have so much to cover already. So instead, we'll be moving on to footage from the field, where we're going to open up the webinar again to you guys to ask us questions about what you've been seeing while viewing and monitoring those wildlife cameras set up over at the Brady Sullivan Tower. Now, it looks like we might have some shy folks because I haven't seen anything dinging in that Q&A yet, but I'm thinking you guys might be typing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen momentarily, and we're going to have a full screen of Chris, who should be able to, you guys can pin Chris so that he's the one that we're looking at, and I'll let you give our fine folks.
Introduce myself.
Yeah, let me stop sharing so we can actually see you, Chris.
Thanks, Willa.
For sure.
I've been working with New Hampshire Audubon for over 30 years now as a raptor biologist focused on monitoring and management of birds of prey. I came to New Hampshire already interested in raptors, having worked with the National Park Service on a peregrine falcon hacking project in Lake Superior at Isle Royale National Park, and also monitoring bald eagle nesting attempts in the wake of the Exxon Valdez oil spill in southwestern Alaska. And those experiences prepared me for working with peregrines, bald eagles, and ospreys in New Hampshire, which I've been doing since 1990. And in that time, met so many amazing citizens of the state who want to get involved and work with birds of prey and do something that is that accomplishes some goals for the state. And I should mention that the work that we do at New Hampshire Audubon with our endangered and threatened birds of prey is done in collaboration and cooperation with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. We are a collaborative team, and Audubon provides Fish and Game with a whole cadre of additional volunteers who aren't directly volunteering with the Fish and Game Department, and having eyes and ears all over the state is a tremendous bonus for this sort of work, which, by the way, is beginning as we speak. We're into the breeding season for both eagles and peregrines, and we're a little behind the 8 ball yet on northern harriers, which is the other species we're following currently. They're not going to nest until May. So I don't know if that's a sufficient introduction or if we have any questions, but I'm happy to take those questions.
Excellent. We do have a question, Chris. We have a question from Candace Fowler, who's says, I'd love to know a bit about if you get to choose what you study, or if you started studying out everything and narrowed it down.
Actually, in undergrad school, I studied forests. I studied a tornado-damaged ecosystem near my college campus in Hanover, Indiana. But in grad school, I actually focused on a bird, but it was the sharp-tailed grouse, which is anything but a raptor. and I was involved in monitoring a declining population of those birds in the middle of Lake Superior. But I managed to fall into this project of peregrine falcon chick releasing, which was being done all over the country in the 80s. My college or my graduate school advisor happened to be the coordinator of that program for the upper Midwest. His name was Harrison Bud Tordoff, along with Pat Reddig. They were both very involved in that project in the upper Midwest. So that's how I got involved in peregrines.
We have another one that just came into the chat from Erin Cotello. And she writes, one of my professors at the University of Wisconsin was Dr. Stanley Temple. He was an inspiration to her. At the time, he was involved with the peregrine falcon, which was endangered. Have you ever had the opportunity to meet him in your travels, Chris?
I have not. I have managed to meet, before he passed away, Dr. Tom Cade, who was the founding force behind the Peregrine Fund, which was the group that worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the U.S. Forest Service and other agencies to develop the process of releasing young peregrines to the wild back in the 1970s. Remember, we had all of our peregrine falcon nesting sites throughout eastern North America had disappeared. The birds had died from old age, and there were no young to replace them because the young had failed to hatch for 10 to 20 years because of the concentrations of DDT in the eggs, which prevented them from hatching. So the idea of restoring a population without adults to grow the population was, for some people, it was a very intimidating idea, but not for Dr. Tom Cade. So I'd like to meet Stan Temple. I've never had the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. Great question. And what a cool opportunity. This next question comes from Amelia, who I misidentified earlier. Amelia says, as an environmental science major myself, what is some general advice you have for anyone who aspires to work in a field similar to yours? Her dream job is anything that involves helping animals, whether it's directly or indirectly, i.e. wildlife rehab.
Well, I guess the advice I would have is don't plan on getting rich. These jobs are not, they don't compensate you really well in terms of financially. However, the people you meet and the places that you go, it sounds like a Dr. Seuss book, doesn't it?
It does.
The experiences that you have are just not replaceable. So don't hesitate to get involved in that. Realize what, be realistic about what, where it's going to take you in terms of your finances and your life, and find other ways to deal with that. But get outside and get involved.
Awesome. That's great. That's very inspirational, Chris. Thanks for saying that. Are there any questions that folks would like to ask themselves if we choose to do the raise the hand option? I know that typing can be challenging for a lot of people, and I don't want that to be limiting. So if you have a question that you would like to ask yourself, try the raise your hand button, and I should be able to open it up and unmute individual attendees. We'll give you guys maybe 2 more minutes. And Chris, I've got one for you while we're giving people some time.
All right.
If you could do it again, per se, before you got super invested in the raptors specifically, or maybe the sharp-tailed grouse, is there another bird that you would choose to focus on? And because you've put so much time, so many years and work into these particular creatures, the harrier, the peregrine, the bald eagle, and the osprey too, I believe. Would you focus on something different if you could do it again?
Well, I don't know if I would focus on it if I could do it over again, but the one thing I would like to see, although it probably won't happen before I retire from this position, is I'd like to see golden eagles breeding in New Hampshire, or at least in New England. Once again, we haven't had documented golden eagles breeding in the state since the early 1960s, which is about as long as I've been alive. And the last known pair in neighboring Maine stopped attending their nest site in, I think, the early 1990s. So while there are pairs breeding in the Gaspé Peninsula still, which is only about 500 miles away to our northeast, and while we do see them pass through in migration and a few in the winter months, we don't have any breeding pairs in places like Eagle Cliff and Franconia Notch, or the Diamond Peaks and the Dartmouth Grant, or any of the other potential cliff nest sites that they might occupy. So I'd love to see that again while I'm still able to use my eyes.
Well, you're still able to use it. Excellent. We did get a couple more questions coming in. Thanks, everybody. This one I'm not totally sure if we'll be able to answer. It's pertaining to passenger pigeons. Chris, are you familiar with passenger pigeons?
I never saw any in person.
Okay, in terms of, well, no, I mean, sorry, the messenger pigeons.
Oh, homing pigeons.
Homing pigeons, yes, I wasn't
That's
thinking the right
different than
term.
passenger pigeons.
That is different. The passengers are gone. We have someone named Matthew who's asking, in the recent movie, The King's Man, a pigeon delivered a World War I message from Germany to England. How do the handlers communicate a specific delivery address to the bird? It's okay if you don't know the answer to that one. We can continue moving, but I figured I'm interested.
Oh, I thought this was going to be a question about peregrine falcons
peregrines?
eating homing pigeons.
I think you might know more about that.
Let me start with that. When we collect prey remains from peregrine falcon nest sites, we frequently discover plastic leg bands, which are different than the bands that the bird banding lab issues for most native birds. And they belong to homing pigeons that have been released with color bands on them. We do find those in peregrine falcon nest sites. And so among the various kinds of pigeons that peregrines can eat, homing pigeons are apparently vulnerable in some way. Now, the whole idea behind homing pigeons is they go back to a place that they know of. You can't give them an address and say, go there. They don't do that. They want to go back to their roost site where their mates are. So when people race homing pigeons, they take them hundreds of miles away from their stable, so to speak, and release them there and see how fast they can get back. So I'm not sure you can believe everything you see in the movies, but unless those pigeons were raised in the place that they were going to deliver the message, I don't see how that would work.
That is fabulous. Thank you for taking a stab at that question. Here's one a little bit closer to your expertise, my friend, and it's from Jessica Labrie. Hi, Jess. Chris, with your particular experiences and expertise, what would you like to see from landowners and stewards? RE, how can we help?
I don't know that this pertains to peregrine falcons, although I can think of one thing for peregrines. That would be continue to promote small and medium-sized passerine birds in your neighborhood. Do things to feed the medium-sized birds because they are the food source for many of our larger birds of prey, from peregrines to redtails and on up. I think one thing that has surprised me looking at aerial photographs that you can look at just by typing addresses in on Google. You can look at forested areas or neighborhoods, whatever you want from the air. What I've noticed in 30 years working in New Hampshire is how many of our unbroken forest tracts are being sort of impinged upon by neighborhoods, and areas along rivers are getting roads cut into them very close to the riverbank. Cul-de-sacs are being built, inserted sort of into big blocks of forest, which potentially offer nest sites for some of our birds of prey. And that particularly came up today when I was looking at areas around a known bald eagle nest, seeing how in a few years the landscape around them has changed in some major ways. That's okay for a while, but after a while it becomes too much for those birds to bear.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. So there's a couple more questions pertaining to some different birds species that we'll get to a little bit later, but because we want to focus back on our peregrine falcons, we'll save those to the end. So if you guys, those of you who wrote into that Q&A, give us a couple minutes afterwards and we can definitely address them specifically because they are in Chris's area of expertise. But back to the falcons, thank you guys so much for participating in that little activity. I hope it was interesting and engaging. And I'm so thrilled that there are future environmental educators out here joining us today because that is super inspirational. It is pretty amazing that I, an environmental educator, gets to work alongside Chris and other senior biologists here at New Hampshire Audubon because I've always viewed these folks as mentors, and now I get to work alongside them and learn directly from them and hear these stories. And it's really empowering. And I wish you guys all the best of luck in pursuing your dreams and your passions, especially if they relate to nature. And peregrine falcons, of course. All right, my friends. So in order to talk more about the peregrine falcon, I want to show you guys some photo images of peregrine falcons. And to stay on task, I have created another PowerPoint because they are super easy to utilize while we're doing this webinar thing. That said, at the end of this particular webinar, when we wrap up around 8 o'clock, if anyone would like to stick around and check out some actual stuff that I brought with me, I've got some skulls and feathers, as well as an actual mount of a peregrine falcon juvenile. I would love to take some time and chit chat with you. I know Chris would probably be very interested in doing that as well.
That would be great to see that close to the camera where people could look at it.
I think so too. So we'll hop into the PowerPoint for now, just because it makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see it. And we're going to go over some of the really unique elements that really make a peregrine stand out from the rest. And I am very biased because I just think they are the most gorgeous birds of prey out there, from that unbelievable golden cere to the dark hood and those magnificent eyes. And I could gush on and on all day, but I wrote notes so I can stay on track. And we're going to start firstly with those amazing eyes. And as you guys can see, just from looking at that photo, a peregrine's eyes are enormous compared to the rest of its head. And that's because they take up a ton of space in order to provide a ton of vision. Peregrine falcons have large eyes and exceptional eyesight. You guys have all heard the term eagle eyes before, I'm sure. And we know that birds of prey have excellent binocular vision. Binocular meaning they use both eyes to focus on objects of interest, and that's the type of eyesight that we have. The peregrine is no exception to this. They have unbelievably good eyesight. Imagine being able to see a pigeon from a mile away. A mile is about the length of 17.5 football fields laid out in a row the long way. Tricky for you as a human? Try impossible, but not if you're a falcon. They do this because they have way more going on inside their eyes than many other animals. From size, again, check out the size of those eyeballs. If you guys had eyeballs similar to a peregrine falcon or other birds of prey, your eyes would be similar to the size of a tennis ball. That would be something. They also have more fovea, and fovea are the depressions in our eyes where vision acuity is its best. And instead of having one like us humans, falcons have two. So you can imagine how much more impressive their eyeballs are. But imagine how a peregrine hunts. They're not doing the sit and stoop technique like many other birds of prey. Peregrines are actively pursuing their prey. And in order to do this effectively, they've got some extra equipment that's helping them out. So, sorry, I couldn't find a photo of a peregrine falcon that was showing this, but I found Chris's favorite, so it's gonna work for tonight. All birds have a nictitating membrane, or a third eyelid, that covers the lens and prevents it from drying out while in flight or being damaged by floating particles like dust or maybe small insects. While many birds have opaque membranes, you guys may have pet birds at home, or you've seen ducks or crows. When they close that third eyelid, it's really milky colored. It's not as translucent as this. Peregrine falcon's eyes are almost entirely see-through, which allows the predatory bird to remain focused on their prey, even when that third eyelid is closed, protecting them from the wind. The peregrine basically has its own built-in goggles. So we know a falcon can protect its lens from drying out or getting scratched while diving, but there's more needed to keep your eyes safe when they're exposed to 240 miles per hour speeds. Let's take a look at what's going on behind those fancy feathers. Check this out. If we were to zoom through the air like Superman, our eyes would end up getting squished against the back of our eye sockets, completely blurring our vision, not to mention very probably damaging our cornea. Unlike us humans who only have eye sockets keeping our eyeballs in place, peregrines have bony rings that are physically attached to their corneas. Rings prevent compression and allow a peregrine's eyes to remain intently focused on their prey while avoiding buildings or trees or cliffs and flying at top speed. Now, these bony rings are great at keeping a bird's eye in one place without influence from outside pressure, but they do reduce their ability to do something that your eyes can. If I asked you guys to look up at the ceiling without moving your head or neck, I'd wager that most of you could do so without a problem. If I asked you to do the same thing, but instead of looking up towards the ceiling, I asked you to look down towards your toes or your nose, I'd wager a lot of you could do that pretty simply too. If I were to coax a peregrine falcon into doing the same thing I asked of you, they wouldn't be able to comply. That sclerotic ring is essential for keeping their eyes securely in place, no matter what turbulence they experience in flight, but it does mean that the falcon must move its head in order to look around. Next time you observe birds, note their eye movement. Most, if not all the birds you see will move their heads to change their perspective rather than flicking their eyes. In addition to that incredible eyesight, they have a bony ridge atop their eye that protects the delicate eye below from potential impact hazards such as leaves, branches, and fighting prey present. Additionally, this same ridge, it's basically your brow ridge, and you guys have seen this on eagles who have a much more prominent one. It allows them to effectively have their own visor and protects their eyes from above, from a glare that the sun could create. You're not likely to see a bird of prey lifting their wing to create a shade screen, although there are birds that do that. This photo here is of a black heron. Let's continue on. Another effective way peregrines enhance their daytime hunting performance is with strategic plumage. Plumage refers to feathers. When we talk about feathers all over the bird's body, we're referring to their plumage. And these peregrines have really effective plumage that assists in numerous ways. Peregrines have dark feathers located below their eyes, referred to as malar stripes. These wide markings are thought to reduce glare. Both adult, as seen in the one below, that's one of our Manchester falcons screaming at us. Chris took that photo a couple years ago. That adult and that juvenile in the upper right are showing these beautiful malar stripes. So it's something that is not adapted from youth to adult. Juveniles develop it too as soon as they get rid of their first coat of white fluffy feathers. And both of these guys are thought to have inspired the eye black that athletes often sport. Back in the 1940s, a charred cork was used to create that light absorbing mark on the cheekbone. Since then, athletes have been mimicking nature with grease sticks and more recently, adhesive stickers. Although the latter apparently has zero impact on glare reduction, but a marked increase in advertising opportunities. Back to the skulls. One of the most amazing physical features of the peregrine falcon is found in their nostrils, also referred to as nares. So you guys can see I've got an image up here on the top portion of a red-tailed hawk's skull, and down at the bottom is a peregrine falcon's. Now I want you guys to focus on this spot here. That's the peregrine falcon. That's their nare or their nostrils. And I want you guys to look and compare it to that nare or nostril there. There's a marked difference, and there's a marked difference for all birds of prey when you're comparing the falcons versus the hawks, or not butios, that's the hawks, eagles. So let's take a look and discuss what is going on when we're looking at that here. Unlike the red-tailed hawk, who relies on stealth and sit and wait techniques while hunting, peregrines attack aerially by actively pursuing their prey. They feed primarily on songbird species and waterfowl, as well as the occasional bat. As agile, high-speed hunters, their breathing requirements are different from the aforementioned species. Peregrine nares are equipped with tubercles, and that's that weird little cone-shaped thing in the center that makes it look like the nair or nostril isn't even hollow. What that nair does, what that tubercle does is effectively break up airflow rather than allowing it to rush in with extreme force. Imagine if you guys put your face right next to a fan and had it blowing full force into your nose. Those of you who ski, imagine going down full speed without your goggles protecting your nose. You don't have to think about the frostbite element. The bird isn't worrying about that either. But the force of the air going into your lungs that quickly makes it really hard to breathe. And if you, as a peregrine falcon, are stooping at 240 miles per hour, if that tubercle wasn't there and all the air was rushing through the nostril, a peregrine falcon would effectively blow up into a poof of feathers. The peregrine has built-in baffles, and those baffles of the nose of the peregrine have also been thought to influence the baffles that we're seeing in jets. Pretty impressive biomimicry. Another excellent adaptation of a peregrine falcon is their absolutely majestic wings. Now, peregrine falcons' wings, beyond being just breathtakingly beautiful in terms of plumage, are also incredibly sharp. Check out the W or the M that is made when a bird is preparing to lift off or to cool off. That's one of the ways they cool their body heat, is just kind of like us when we take our arms away from our, what do we call this? Our trunk, right? To cool off. It's very similar for birds too. This bird is either preparing to take flight or is cooling off. But either way, it's showing that incredible sharp-edged feathering of those long, pointy wings. And you guys can see how long those wings are, because if you can imagine him closing the wings, you'd note that they're almost as long as their tail. So peregrines have perfect wings for what they're designed to do. Those long, pointed wings are perfect for long-distance speed and quick maneuverability. When a peregrine prepares for that incredible stoop, that speed-defying dive, they firstly flap those stiff wings to gain momentum and then tuck them tight to their sides, becoming so streamlined that they slice through the air. Many fighter jets not only have figured out the baffle design based on a peregrine falcon, but the actual replication of a stooped peregrine falcon position. That wing shape is very commonly seen in jet plane designs. The peregrine falcon is aerodynamically unbeatable. This photograph I took last year. Chris is probably right behind the head of this little chick. I want you guys to take a look at this for a second, because he looks a little bit like a Muppet. It's pretty entertaining to look at. He's covered in that downy plumage that all chicks first develop before this gorgeous plumage takes place. And before this beautiful plumage, this is adult plumage, they have a darker, more chocolate bar colored feathering. And you can sort of see it creeping in right underneath this one's eyes. But what I want you guys to focus on is not the goofy fluff that's covering this little munchkin, but look at those feet. Are you kidding me? This little chick, who's already been banded and is going to be returning back to his nest, has talons that look exactly like those from the scenes of Jurassic Park. That little tiny peregrine falcon chick already has feet that have developed into future, I don't want to say killing machines, because that makes it sound so aggressive, and they're not doing it to be aggressive, right? Raptors are carnivorous. They're using that tool in order to catch their food. But those feet are a force to be reckoned with. Now, right now in this photograph, they're not capable of doing too much. Those talons could definitely cut and tear, but the strength is not there in the joints just yet. That's not to say we don't exercise caution when working around them. But those feet right there are another fabulous feature of a peregrine falcon. Prey is killed on impact when a falcon essentially punches it midair with their surprisingly large feet before retrieving it an instant later while they're still airborne. And looking at the feet of these little guys, you can imagine how large they are when those talons are curled up. It's a force to be reckoned with. A falcon's feet grow rapidly, and the width of their tarsus, that lower part of the leg where the band is secured, reaches maturity before the falcon has even developed the muscles necessary for them to stand up. These little dudes are propped up just like that because they don't have the strength to actually pick their bodies up. And so when Chris takes a chick from the nesting box, he gently plops it down, and that is where that bird effectively stays. they might shuffle about on those goofy little hackles, but they're not able to stand up, and they don't tend to throw themselves backwards yet in that defense mechanism where they throw up those talons, because all raptor species, the feet is the thing to be worried about. A beak is not going to be something fun to encounter, but the feet are something seriously worth paying attention to and respecting. The large feet and incredibly sharp talons are a peregrine's #1 hunting tool and the most dangerous part of any bird classified as a bird of prey. If those feet don't work for an instant kill for a potential prey, a peregrine is going to use their second method of, another nice word for that. Well, we'll get into it in a second. I want you guys to take a look at the beak of this female that was in the nesting box last year. This is our current female, who was screaming at us as we were reaching in and taking out the chicks and telling us she was not thrilled with the situation occurring up in Manchester. Her babies were returned safe and sound with those little bands, but she was not pleased that we took them in the first place. And that's why her mouth was open, which created this awesome shot for us to see what's going on with the peregrine falcon's beak. They've got those big feet, those huge eyes, and this really unique beak. I want you guys to focus in on the upper mandible, that top portion of the beak. And I want you to look right there. You guys see that sharp, kind of triangular shaped point in that upper beak? That is what is referred to as a tomial tooth. Now, it's not an actual tooth, of course, birds don't have teeth. It's part of their beak. It's made out of bone. And that tomial tooth has a perfect partner in the lower mandible where the notch allows it to safely sever anything that goes in there, which is why a bite from a falcon or a kestrel or a merlin is going to hurt significantly more than if you get nipped by something like a screech owl or even a barn owl who doesn't have that tomial tooth. That is designed, we believe, to sever spinal cords and would be the coup de grace for a peregrine if they were to have caught a prey that wasn't yet dead. They would quickly clip with that tomial tooth and accompanying notch, and that would be the end of their potential prey, which would be easier for the peregrine because the prey will then not be able to fight back and potentially harm them, and could be an easier death for a prey who is now stuck in the talons of one of the most voracious hunters around. So let me make sure all of these features combined are a true force to be reckoned with when it comes to the peregrine falcon. Now that we know some of the physical features of these incredible falcons, I'm going to pass it on to Chris, who's going to talk to us about the differentiating features of male peregrine falcons and female peregrine falcons. For those of you guys who are interested in knowing the difference just by eyesight alone, or for those of you guys following at home with the Manchester peregrine falcons. They have all of those things we talked about in common, but there's stuff that differentiates them too.
Yeah, there certainly is. Just to start out with, these birds are territorial. They occupy a place some year round and some only during the breeding season, and then they migrate away during the winter. But many of our New Hampshire birds are found near their nest site even during the winter months, particularly in our urban areas where they can find shelter and abundant food in the winter. So you'll have a male and a female occupying essentially the same territory. The male tends to roam further from the center of the territory. The area might be 100 square miles, 50 square miles. That could be 10 mile by 10 miles out of the nest area. Or if it's along a river, it might be longer in one direction and less wide in the other direction. But these birds will hang out together and occupy the same spaces and places, often keeping in eye contact with each other. And this time of year, oftentimes staying very close together because we're entering the breeding season. As you can see, obviously here, female peregrines are considerably larger than males, sometimes as much as 25 to 30% larger in weight and in dimensions. In every way, the female is the bigger bird with more ability to protect the nest site because she's bigger and more intimidating. And the male is perhaps more of an adept hunter. Being smaller, he can actually pursue animals into smaller spaces. But they both are able to capture their own food. Now, let's talk a little more before I move on to the next picture. Another thing that you see frequently, although it's not always the case, there's lots of individual difference. The males tend to have a whiter chest and belly with less dense dark markings. That's the bird on the right. The females tend to be off-white in their breast coloration, more of a creamy color. That's not because she's got dirt on her feathers. That's because her feathers are that off-white color. And her breast and belly tend to have more of this barring on it, higher up towards her throat. That's not always the rule with every pair, but it's the case many times. Another thing you want to look at, and I don't know if you can see my cursor on here or not, probably can't. All right, that's all right. The males oftentimes have, well, actually, it varies from bird to bird. Some peregrines have a big white cheek patch behind that malar stripe. Thank you. And although it's not the case with these two birds, sometimes there is no white patch, and it's more of a full hood of dark that covers their whole head and neck. So you can tell individual birds by studying that stuff carefully. And if you see them again at a nest site, you can tell which bird it is sometimes. I'm going to have Willa move forward. Yeah, next slide. Now that last pair was just a wonderful side-by-side from Rochester, New York, but I have several shots closer to home here, although we're still out of state with this one. This is a bridge over the Merrimack River in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is not far from New Hampshire as the bird travels. You can see here clearly who's the bigger bird. The male is on the right, the smaller bird, the female on the left. Again, the lighter color on the male breast, the creamier color on the female. Another thing is the backs. The back feathers on males are a slaty gray, kind of like a military jet. Very frequently, a much lighter gray, blue-gray color. Whereas the females oftentimes have a more of a charcoal colored back and wings, oftentimes with just hints of brown in the female coloration as well. The males tend to have brighter yellow on their cere, which is across the top of the beak, the skin there, and the female and on the eye ring. The females tend to have a less bright yellow coloration. Want to go forward? Now we've moved into New Hampshire. This is a pair that nested for several years in downtown Nashua. These birds often roost together overnight within a few feet of each other, sharing the same perches. The male is very attentive to the female this time of year because he wants to protect his breeding possibilities, and he wants to protect the nest site from any rivals that might move in. But what's interesting is there is rivalry amongst female peregrines as well. And the females will oftentimes get into battles with extra females that float through a territory, checking out opportunities for nesting. And the males will sit and watch that battle happen. And then if a male interloper comes in, the females will sit back and watch that battle take place, because what really is important to them is the territory as opposed to the mate themselves. It's the territory and its value as a place to raise your young. And as long as they're both alive, they'll probably be mates. But if something happens to one of them, usually that vacancy is filled quite fast. Let's move on to the next one. Now we finally made it to downtown Manchester. I just want to mention, since this is for the both Concord and Manchester public libraries, The city of Manchester, Greater Manchester, has 2 nesting pairs of peregrine falcons currently, one occupying the buildings in downtown, including the Brady Sullivan Tower at the north end of downtown by the Amoskeag Bridge. And we have also a second pair on the edge of Manchester along the Merrimack River at the southern end of town, around the 101-293 bridge. They nest on the bridge structure as opposed to on a building. There are other pairs not far away. If you head up towards Concord, there's a nesting pair at the Merrimack Station, which is also known as the Bow Power Plant, about halfway between Concord and Manchester, maybe a little closer to Concord. They nest in a nest box that we've placed for them there. And then if you move all the way up to Concord, I happen to visit another pair that nests in our Swenson Granite Quarry, and has for several years. Giant granite cliff face on the north end of Concord that you don't see because it faces inward. It's a big hole in the ground. But the falcons have found it and recognized it as a suitable cliff to find a ledge to raise their young on. So we have falcons all up and down the Merrimack Valley now. And I got a little off topic, which was plumage. But again, on this picture, you can see.
Wait. I was going to say, before you tell them, I was going to make a poll, but I think it's going to mess up. Oh, good. Okay. I was going to say, this would be a great opportunity to.
Here.
Yeah.
And after all that I've told you, I'm pretty certain that you can distinguish which bird is the male and the female.
I agree. I was trying to do a poll, but I think it might mess stuff up. Again, sorry. And thank you for being patient with us, my friends, because if I do a poll really quick, I think we can just do it right or left. Well, no, I guess it would be, I don't know how to do the poll that way. My brain doesn't think that quickly, but if you guys want to type into the chat, which of these falcons you think is the female, the one on the left or the one on the right?
Can we go back to the picture?
Feel free to do that. Yeah, there he is.
Is the
I won't read anyone's names
on the
out
right
loud.
or the left?
Exactly. And I won't read anyone's names, so you don't have to feel embarrassed about putting them in there. But if you guys want to take a stab at it, knowing what you now know about the falcons and how to tell them apart, feel free to pop it into the chat.
We're getting great.
Right.
100%
you guys
response
are good.
here.
You guys are good. The one on the B, the one on the left, the one on the left, the one on the left, male on the right, female on the left, female on the left, mom on the left, female on left, mom likes B.
So the question is, do these two birds have favorite letters? And do they always perch on those letters?
That is great.
Peregrines do have favorite perch sites. That, you know, if you watch a individual or a pair of birds at a breeding site for more than a time, you'll recognize 3 or 4 or 5 spots that are their favorite places. Some for shelter from weather, and others just as place to hunt from, hunting perches.
Awesome. So those are the ones we're looking at for those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel. These are the exact birds. These are our celebrity falcons, and they make it really easy for us to tell the difference. I have a hard time telling who is who when they're not together for a lot of peregrine falcons, but not for these guys. The male has this, his cheek is almost the color of snow. He's so sleek and streamlined. He's very sophisticated looking. And the female is just such a Hulk. She's a monster. And she always looks a little ruffled, doesn't she, Chris? She always looks a little like puffed up. And I refer to her plumage as champagne gold for her chest marks. I think it makes her sound a little more fancy, but don't be fooled. Her fancy is not covering up the ferocity that is hidden beneath that beautiful plumage.
Can I add one thing?
Of course you can.
That would be just realize that these birds don't live forever, and they run into problems that can cause them to be injured or killed. And in fact, over the course of the 21 years that we've had peregrines nesting in Manchester in the Brady Sullivan pair, we've had only 2 different males in that entire time. So they've each they're lasting on average about 10 years, those 2 birds. In the same period of time, we've had 3 different females. And so when you recognize what these birds look like in plumage, Willa, you might, if you internalize that, you might be one of the first to recognize when we've had a mate switch in the future. For instance, a male shows up with leg bands all of a sudden. That would be a new male. Or he shows up with a full hood instead of a narrow malar stripe and a white cheek patch. They don't change that over time. And very few adult peregrines receive bands as adults. It's mostly chicks that get leg bands. So they don't show up one year with a band when they didn't have it the previous year, with a few exceptions, which we won't talk about today, but I would love to share that at some point.
Not just yet. Excellent. Awesome. So of course, Manchester is no Chicago, but there's a lot of similarities there. And for those of you guys who were oohing and aahing and clutching your hearts like me while you were watching the chicks getting fed so gently by a mama whose toenail tooth is able to sever a spinal cord and converts so quickly to this gentle, oh my gosh, just makes me want to cry every time I see them. They're just amazing. That is what you guys will be able to see too in our own resident peregrines in Manchester because of these incredible nest cams. It's such a privilege to be able to be a fly on the wall per se and get to see these guys through that developmental stage. So there's no chicks yet. There should be eggs coming. And I do have a poll for you all in just a moment where I'm going to ask for you all to make a guess as to how many eggs we think that this year's peregrine female will lay. And then in just a few short weeks, we should be seeing eggs. And then in just a couple weeks after that, we'll be seeing chicks. And if you're interested, we can follow them through that life cycle until they fledge off into the big city. Oh, it's amazing. Does
I
anyone
just want to say one other thing. That was an excellent video. For those of you who recognized a Southern accent from that Massachusetts wildlife biologist, Tom French grew up in Louisiana, and he never did shed his Southern accent, despite working for the Massachusetts Wildlife Agency for over 30 years. He recently retired. Actually came up to Manchester about 4 or 5 years ago and helped us with the banding of the peregrine chicks in Manchester. If you were there, I don't know, 2014, 15, you may have actually met him.
Right on. I did not know that, Chris. That makes it even more amazing. We are going to turn back to the question and answer now so that we can start wrapping stuff up. And I'm keeping an eye on the time to make sure that we let you guys continue on with your busy lives. Just a quick reminder that we do have some stuff that we're willing to show off after the 8 o'clock ending time, and a gentle nudge that if you're interested in joining us again for our 3rd program, where we're going to be really talking about the eggs, the egg development inside of the bird's body, how many eggs to be expected after I throw you guys a poll in a moment before I tell you the answers, as well as what's actually going on inside of the egg during development. It's one of those hands-on ones where if you're interested in bringing your own raw chicken egg to the webinar, we can virtually dissect one together and go over all of the egg anatomy parts. So if anyone has questions, now's an awesome opportunity to toss them into the Q&A and I will help facilitate. For those of you guys that are going to have to run momentarily, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. It brings us so much joy knowing that there are fellow raptor and peregrine falcon and nature enthusiasts out there. We at New Hampshire Audubon are just honored to be able to offer webinars like these. And thank you so much to our partners, the Manchester City Library and the Concord Public Library, where there are some materials available for you guys if you want to check out your local libraries and see if you can pick up some handouts, some observation sheets, things that you can use to follow along with the webcam. Those are available there. So hopping on to the Q&A, Chris, we've got some cool questions if you're willing to take some.
Sure.
All right, so let's hop up to the top. We had a question from earlier in the day, and I don't know if you covered this one yet because I was kind of listening and reading at the same time, but Erin would like to know, back to the golden eagles, what is the main reason the golden eagle is not breeding in this area anymore? Is it habitat? Is it competition?
Probably a couple reasons. One is the same as we've had the theme with many of our raptors, and that is the decline in populations due to DDT, which in the most part we've taken care of now, but it's so decimated populations that it's taken a long time to rebound. Golden eagles actually seem to be stable currently in the eastern U.S.
Glitch.
generally, breeding site. But there's another threat out there, and that is lead, not from fishing tackle, but from exploded hunting ammo, which when it hits its target breaks into tiny fragments. And that lead can be then consumed later in the meat of prey animals. Golden eagles are big eaters of deer carcasses, especially in the winter. And so they're vulnerable to that as well. But habitat has changed. Golden eagles would be more apt to thrive in an area of pasture land. And New Hampshire 150 years ago had a lot of cattle and sheep farms, and those have slowly disappeared over the last century, making golden eagles have to work harder for their prey. So that's one of the reasons we have less of them than we had 100 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Switching from bald eagles to northern harriers, another one of your specialties.
Oh, thank you.
Nancy is asking, there's a northern harrier that occasionally hunts a field near me. You are so lucky, Nancy. Where do they typically nest, and how large of an area do they cover for their territory?
We've actually been studying northern harriers now for a couple of years very intensively, following about 20 years without monitoring them. We were monitoring them back in the 80s and 90s as well. Two things to think about is where you can find northern harriers this time of year and in the fall and winter months differs from where you can find them during the breeding season. You can find northern harriers in southern New Hampshire this time of year. You can see them at our seacoast in the salt marsh areas, but as far as we know, they aren't nesting in our salt marshes in the summer months. Currently, our breeding population is almost exclusively confined to Coos County in areas of open fields mixed with wetlands. We do have a couple pairs that have nested as far south as Lyme, New Hampshire, or New Hampshire, but very few pairs south of the White Mountains. That's a pretty brief answer.
No, it's solid. That's amazing, Nancy. You're very, very lucky to have seen them. Matthew was questioning, have any biomimicry applications been discovered from peregrine falcons? I think we might have covered that briefly in the presentation, from their nasal tubercle affecting or influencing baffles, as well as their malar stripes influencing athletes. I'm sure there's been more. That streamlined feature of these babies, right? This is a juvenile mount, and we can tell that this is a juvenile based on what, my friends? Plumage, right? We are not seeing any slate grays or blues. We are seeing chocolatey brown and lots and lots and lots and lots of barring, because this unfortunate friend did not survive to adulthood.
And I'll tell you, that's a female. Look at the size of those feet and the tarsuses. Big feet.
Huge feet, right? Another question. So why do the falcons trust the planter on an apartment deck? That's a great question. Peregrine falcons aren't the only ones doing this either. I've also come into, I know someone who has been monitoring a pair of Eurasian eagle owls that is doing this on an apartment desk. Of course, not here in this country, but it seems to be opportunity and safety and security, and it's in an elevated location, so the amount of predators that could be able to get up there are few and far between.
Well, that planter mimics a natural cliff nesting ledge that has soil that they can create a scrape in, a bowl, and manipulate that substrate. You think about all the rest of those porches on the side of that building. If they don't have dirt in a box there, what is the falcon going to do? Lay the egg on solid concrete? So that spot is a beacon to that nesting female that's a spot to put her eggs. And they didn't put any plants in it.
Yeah, there's a couple of them happening around the city, and gosh, if you could guarantee me that a peregrine falcon would nest on my balcony, I would move to the city tomorrow. Another one, this is a great one from Tina, is does the male do most of the grocery shopping, or does the female hunt equally? It's a great one.
During the time of year when they're courting and laying eggs and raising young, the male does do the majority of the hunting. That's because the female is, with her large size, is better adapted to defend the nest site from any threats. The male then defaults to doing majority of the hunting. The female probably does 60% of the incubation. The male might do 40, and pretty much she's in charge of when the trade-offs occur. The male will stay on the eggs until the female returns, and as soon as she's there, he bolts, and that's partially for self-preservation because remember, she's a third larger and could easily take him in a fight, probably if it came to that. But it's interesting how they divvy up responsibilities. Females are perfectly capable of catching food, and they do so frequently in the fall and winter months. But in the breeding season, she lets that male do more of the hunting.
Mm-hmm. We had an observation from one of our students in Hooksett this past, was that just this week? Last week? Last week?
Week ago.
Yeah, just a week ago, who was saying it's very common that they've observed with the Manchester Peregrine Falcons that the male will bring food and share it with the female. He said he brings her food all the time, but when she comes to the nest with her own catches, she never shares it. And we thought that was just a really great observation coming from one of our fifth graders.
Right, and there's one other addition to that, and that is that when a food item comes in and it's too much to eat at one time, they will cache the food in nooks and crannies around their nest site, on the letters of the building, on other ledges of the building. And so when a bird shows up with a partially mangled food item, it could be that they just went to the refrigerator and got it, as opposed to just caught it on their own.
Their cache site.
Yes.
So I want to take some time to share some of the goodies I have here. And since we are talking about breeding season, we know that these babies are going to be showing up soon. Now, this is not a real peregrine egg. This one is a mold made out of wood, but it is the color. Pretty amazing, right? I talk about the female having champagne gold chest, and I talk about the eggs looking like the goose that laid the golden egg. This is what the peregrine falcon eggs are going to look like. Similar colorations. There might be some variations in here, but it's going to be this size and this shape. We're not dealing with a super oblong egg. We're not dealing with a spherical egg. This is what it is. And I'm going to be sending you guys a poll in like 3 seconds where I'm asking for you guys to just take a guess as to how many of these we're going to be seeing in this year's scrape. So you guys should be seeing this in just a second. I have never done a poll before, but it looks like, yeah, super easy. All right, sweet. So we've got folks coming in. We'll figure out, I think it just gives you 60 seconds to do it or something. I think, I don't actually know. Here we go. Take a guess. How many of these babies are we going to see? Because they are busy breeding at the moment, and the next step will be egg.
It says the host and panelists cannot vote. Darn it, I was going to vote.
Nope, not this time, Chris. And you're not allowed to guess when the first egg will be for this group either, friend. No stuffed peregrines for you. All right, guys, it looks like we are wrapping that up. So it looks like most folks out there, oh, nope, we still have some coming in. 43 of 43. I'll give you guys just another second. And while we wrap that up, I wanted to show you another replica of an actual peregrine falcon skull. So let's end that. I don't know how it's going to work. Okay, sweet. And I'm going to share the results with you guys real quick so we can see who we're thinking. Can you guys see that? Ooh, someone's hopeful for a lot of baby peregrines.
Someone is very ambitious there.
Yeah.
2 people, in fact.
Awesome. We shall see. So it looks like most folks are thinking maybe 3 eggs this year. A couple are thinking 4, 5, 6. No one's thinking lucky number 7. We'll see very soon, within the next couple of weeks. So take a peek at this while you guys are still with me. This is another replica. Sorry, the lighting is a little funky.
It's not bad.
There you go. Okay. So you can see this one does not have those, oh my gosh, my brain. You can see that it's got the ridge that's going to be protecting from potential prey that are fighting back or from
Not the
blasting through
orbitals.
brush, but we do not have the, oh my gosh, Chris,
Orbital.
why am I?
The orbital part, the part that goes right around the eye.
I know, why are
Starts with
both
an
of us?
S.
Son of a sclerotic brain, holy moly, clearly past our bedtime, folks.
It's been
So
an
it's
hour,
not missing
Willa.
that because that part is inside of their eye, which
Yeah.
I find absolutely baffling and absolutely wild. But you can see they've got the little tiny notch in there. So again, kind of a tough angle, but you can see it. You guys seeing that spot right in here? That's where they're eliciting that coup de grace. And now for size comparison, I want you guys to take a peek at this and then take a peek at this. Right next to each other. Whoop. This right here belongs to a red-tailed hawk. And this one's lower mandible actually swings, so I got to hold it with 2 hands. And you can tell there's no tomial tooth here. The nair or nostrils is much different. The eye cavity is even larger. But the general shape and function is pretty similar. Now, last one here. You guys can probably wager a guess as to who this skull belongs to. Size comparison. Peregrine Falcon. Red-tailed hawk. And I've got this guy's feet too. Whoa! This, of course, belongs to our bald eagle. Check this out. His talons and the width of his hand are as big as mine. And I know we haven't met, but I've got really big hands. This is a large raptor. And we can tell that because the size of his skull is significantly larger. You guys have probably all seen red-tailed hawks. You might have seen the peregrine falcons from far away. It's rough to get a close glimpse of them. But most of you have seen a red-tailed hawk. And look at the size comparison here. Pretty impressive stuff. So I want to say thank you again for everyone. If anyone has any questions, you definitely know where to find us. But I want to make sure that we are staying on track and letting you guys go back to your lives and reminding you that this is just 2 out of 5 of these presentations. We're going to be following along with the YouTube screening of our peregrine falcon pair. By the next time we meet, which is sometime in mid-April, there will definitely be eggs and incubation, right, Chris?
Well, we hope there will.
We hope there will.
There should be, if they follow the usual pattern.
Yes. So keep your fingers crossed, keep your eyes on the screen, check them out in the morning, check them out in the afternoon, check them out before you go to bed. It's a cool thing to see. It's local here in New Hampshire, and it's just such an amazing success story.
Now that the time has changed, it's a great way to wake up with your morning coffee and check out the peregrines and watch the sunrise.
Oh, right on. We're going to leave it at that. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your sunrise with the peregrines tomorrow. Take care, stay healthy, stay wild. Until next time, everybody, take care.